beware of the hype curve and the group think that happens in the hype curve, because either extreme on that spectrum is going to be flawed. We want to find the truth.
I'm a very concrete and linear numerical type person. So the idea of creativity has always fascinated me. That's what I wanted to chat to Matt about in this episode. Matt talks about the role of trends, how to cut through the hype around new phenomena, whether that be AI, Web3.
The tech is real. The opportunities are real, but people might be overstating.
There's also an interesting chat around return to work, the unique approach that Matt has taken at his business to bring people back to the office.
If I took you for a walk with my laptop here around the office, it would look like a bar/restaurant/cafe. There's lots of cafe seating.
Matt also talks about creativity and design and how dumb brilliance plays a really important role in successful design.
We've talked about seamless retail experiences for so long that we've actually taken all the interests out of it. And actually what we need to do is put some interesting themes back in.
So keep listening if you need some more dumb brilliance in your life. Welcome to The Thought Follower. I'm Joe Mackay. I've always had a lot of questions about life, and this show is my quest to find some answers. Each week I'll chat to a thought leader to hear what's going on in their space. Let's jump into the next episode. Hey everyone, my guest on The Thought Follower today is Matt Newell. Matt is the CEO of a creative agency called The General Store with HQ in Sydney. He's a smart man, he's a funny man and a creative guy. Most importantly, he's my wife's boss. So I hope this goes well.
We have a lot in common, Joe.
Thanks for coming on and chatting to me. How are you?
Very well, very well. Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Mate, what can you tell us about The General Store? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so we build brands in the retail space. We work with brands like Rebel Sport, BCF, Freedom Furniture, Barbecues Galore. And we have a multidisciplinary team, including strategy, architecture and interiors, where Kaz works, advertising, branding, technology, etc. So we're very good at building these holistic brand experiences for complex businesses.
I don't want this to be like a chat about COVID. Coming out of COVID, clearly like work from home, hybrid work, all that kind of thing became the norm and like a preference for a lot of people. And what you guys at General Store have done is kind of zag and go the other way, and you've really doubled down on the office experience for employees. Can you tell us like what you've done and kind of the rationale behind that?
The decentralized workforce, I think, is probably the one enduring impact that COVID has had. Everyone said COVID would change our lives, and it really hasn't, except for the way that we work. And so I think we were in a position during COVID where we outgrew our space. And so we needed to make a call. Were we going to embrace the decentralized workspace, or were we going to invest in bringing people back together? And we chose the latter. And I'm not saying this is the answer, but certainly for our business, which is a creative business, it's a very multidisciplinary business, very collaborative business. For those reasons, my view and the view of the other partners in the business was that we should invest in bringing people together. So that was part one. Part two was, if we're going to bring people together, we can no longer really force people to come to the office. It's a competitive disadvantage to force that expectation onto team members. And so we took the view that you needed to effectively create a space that competes for patronage, create a space that people want to come to. So who competes for patronage better than anybody else? The answer to that is the hospo industry. So we effectively created a space here in Surrey Hills that used hospitality design techniques. So if I took you for a walk with my laptop here around the office, it would look like a bar/restaurant/cafe. There's lots of cafe seating where people can work on their own or work within a little table of two, or they can slide tables together, make a table of four, slide another table together, make a table of six. And we found that that kind of social setting and the diversity of space and diversity of working modes has performed really well, and so much so that we've created a space that people want to be in and that facilitates certain kinds of behaviours like collaboration, creativity, spaces that clients want to come and hang out in. So we have clients that have offices out in various suburbs, and instead of driving out into Whoop Whoop, they'll come and work from here. People do their exec away days here. And I think if you're investing in a space, you want to know that it's going to be used. So hospitality, I think, creates great inspiration for design techniques for working spaces of the future. That was our bet. That was our experiment. And yeah, it's been, I would say, highly successful.
Is that based on employee morale? Is it business? Is like, how are you tracking success?
So we actually ask our team to be in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But on the Mondays and the Fridays where it's not mandatory, we still get a lot of people coming into the office. And also just through the fact that clients want to have meetings here, that out to say, can I come to your office? It's a big investment up front, but I think in the long term, the time savings of removing travel time, removing Ubers, all that sort of stuff, because people want to come here, I think will deliver a net benefit.
I love it as well because you guys create store experiences like a showroom almost for what it's a great positioning statement. This is what we do every day and we're investing, we're betting on this ourselves. So I think it's really interesting.
We actually had a client come into the office who wasn't a client, just came in to meet a colleague, an old colleague. And they sat in the office and went, oh my God, do you guys do office design? And we were like, well, we sort of specialize in retail store design. And this person was like, I just want, this office is so cool. I don't want to look at your website. I don't want to have a pitch. I just want to know that these people can work on my office. So we're now designing 3 huge offices around the country for a large business. I won't say who it is. So look, I think that investment is paying itself back pretty quickly. And like you say, it's a great flex for our design thinking.
Yeah. So when you get a new brief, how much of this process is science and how much is art? Like this term creativity, I tend to go wishy-washy brainstorms and different things, but in your line of work, you need to be able to deliver commercial results. So what's the process look like? Is it an art? Is it science or a mix?
Look, it's certainly a mix. That's a boring answer though, right? But my view is that the strategic process has actually become too dominant in these types of processes where we do all the research, we do all the analytics, we know from experience how to control human beings in a space and how to get them to move throughout the store and how to get them to speed up in certain areas and slow down in other areas. There are pretty well-defined techniques that we've learned, but that the whole industry has learned. But when I travel the world looking at the best stores, it's the moments of dumb brilliance that everybody remembers. I remember walking into a denim store in Berlin and they had this enormous fish tank filled with jellyfish with neon lights. So the jellyfish looked like they were kind of electric. What has that got to do with denim? Absolutely fucking nothing, right? But I saw that store about 7 years ago and I still remember that store. And so one thing I talk about a lot at the G store is moments of randomness. We've talked about seamless retail experiences for so long that we've actually taken all the interest out of it. And actually what we need to do is put some interesting scenes back in, some moments of, why is there a jellyfish tank? We actually need more moments of that because that's where the creative genius kind of kicks in and interest is created. Otherwise, we're using the same learnings, we're executing the same techniques. And I think retail and design, whatever category we're in, if we're like too heavily on strategy, it gets homogenized quite quickly. And I'm saying this, by the way, as someone with a strategy background, not a creative background. I'm not a creative evangelist. I'm an effectiveness evangelist. And my view is that we're over strategizing. The big money is in these creative leaps.
Hey, it's Joe here. I hope you're enjoying the episode. Every chat in season 1 of The Thought Follower is very different. I've talked to creatives, economists, elite athletes, CEOs, venture capitalists, and a bunch more along the way. You never quite know what you're going to get, so make sure you subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcasts and make sure you don't miss an episode. Get back to the chat. You mentioned that idea of like a seamless experience. I kind of think if you are in the store, like there's a reason you've walked out your front door, go down to the shop. The behavior then is almost signaling like, show me something that's not just all the products online that I could just swipe from home. So then that kind of leads me into how do you create an environment where the dumb brilliance arrives? Like how does that happen?
Good question. I think it's about giving people permission to go for it. It's interesting actually in a corporate commercial creativity environment. I think a lot of our creative thinkers are a bit gun shy and have been trained to do smart creativity, really carefully thought through creativity, which is absolutely required. It's absolutely needed. But we need to leave room for some dumb randomness so that everything's not rationalized within an inch of its life. Because mind you, this isn't about being cavalier with it. It's about, there are certain things where you need a seamless experience. Like we don't want to interrupt the queuing process or the checkout process. They're not really the places for it. But you do want to surprise and delight when you get to the hero category, something that's a bit unexpected. So I think the strategy team need to frame it up and go, this is some space that we can create for it. I think the creative team needs to be given permission to go for it. And then our clients need to be embraced and educated on the commercial benefits of going for it, because ultimately it's about effectiveness, is why I'm championing it.
Yeah, and you put value to that. Like, so you mentioned the denim store. How many jeans did you buy? Did you kit yourself out? Like, that's obviously a memorable experience for you. But how do you quantify that kind of result for clients?
I mean, full disclosure, I did not buy jeans when I walked in there, but I was busy and, you know, short on time and just quite frankly didn't need a pair of jeans. But I was in Berlin for the World Retail Congress back in whatever year it was, and that was the store that everybody was talking about. And they weren't necessarily even mentioning the jellyfish tank, but I guarantee that was the top of that, put that brand to the top of their minds, so that they then rationalized everything else positively about that store. And I know that people from that conference were going and buying jeans so they could say that they bought their jeans from there. So I think, you know, memorability is important. Physical stores post-COVID are absolutely booming at the moment, and we need to find ways to make them interesting and make them engaging. And I think big creative leaps are the opportunity there.
I can't get my head around that physical stores booming. When everything happened, I was genuinely stressed. I didn't know what was going to happen. So is it something you expected, and like, can you explain it?
Look, I'd be lying if I said I predicted this. All the predictions from everybody was that online would boom and continue to boom. And that hasn't been the case. Online has boomed. It's then fallen. It will probably correct back to its trend line. The reality is human behavior is stickier and harder to change than we think. You know, we know that with, you know, big pushes around, you know, global warming and sustainability. We all know that we need to do more, but our behaviors are really sticky and really slow to move en masse. So I think one thing that you can predict is less change than people like to talk about. Yeah, look, I think there's a counter correction towards stores. People are enjoying getting back out into the community. Also, retailers have invested a lot into stores. So the caliber of store experiences has improved. I think customers are enjoying that at the moment. I think there's also been a settling of technology, which tends to happen. So the stores that are doing well online are the more functional or low-cost operators. Luxury, for example, it's all about in-store.
Feel the textures and kind of hold it and look at it in the mirror and all that kind of stuff.
Have an experience and
Bit of a general question for you. What does thought leadership mean to you?
Thought leadership at its essence for me is about independent thinking. We see a lot of group thinking. You know, we're seeing it now with, you know, often it revolves around technology. But the ability to not go along with group thinking and work things out for yourself and see opportunities tends to, by definition, separate you from the group. And not to say that being separate from the group is the best place to be, because sometimes there's wisdom in the group, but it's to not assume that the group's answer is the right answer, and to at least have an inquisitive mind, to be open to independent thinking, I think is the key there.
I really like that definition. I feel as though we're all thought leaders in a certain sphere of influence, but when you are going against the group, or like maybe what you guys did with the office, I think that is a really good way to look at it. One thing I can't get my head around is this idea of trends and how they seem to be so cyclical and they kind of keep coming back. How do you think that sits with this idea of thought leadership? How does that work?
The main thing, I think what you're describing there is like a circular, you know, every 20 years baggy jeans come back into to fashion, for example, every 30 years. What I see with thought leadership trends is more like corrections and then big counter corrections and then big counter corrections and then big counter corrections. For example, social media was the advertising channel du jour 5 years ago, and now it's kind of less popular because it's expensive and it's got some privacy issues associated with it. So you kind of get these sort of big swings and counter swings that happen all the time. I'll give you an example. So last year, a lot of our clients and a lot of our team and a lot of the industry was talking about Web3. Web3 was the future. The metaverse was the future. Big retailers, Nike, luxury retailers, collaborations with Fortnite, virtual world pop-up. This was going to be the future. So back then, I was worried about the hype curve. And I was kind of going, people are overselling this. It feels way too hot. There's too much evangelism going on. And so my view on that world was cautionary. Let's not overcook. Let's not overspend this. Now, we participated in some activities in that area for some clients, and it was quite successful. But by and large, I was cautioning people to be wary of it. So now it's come off the other side of the hype curve, and everyone's saying, oh, it's dead. It's not the future. Everyone was crazy. Crypto's killed it, so it's all dead. My view is that it's not dead. We've now overcorrected. It's an interesting tool that fundamentally has some quality tech behind it. It has a huge audience base, particularly with younger customers and gamers and things like that, but there is a role for it. So for me, that's just an example of beware of the hype curve and the group think that happens in the hype curve, because either extreme on that spectrum is going to be flawed. We want to find the truth. The truth is somewhere in between the doomsdayers and the evangelists. The truth is somewhere in between there. At the moment, we've got AI on a massive hype curve. And look, again, the tech is real. The opportunities are real, but people might be overstating the speed with which that impact will happen and the size of the impact. It'll settle. That's kind of like, I think, a good example of groupthink, hype curve versus maintaining some independent thought and hunting for real value within that hype curve.
So do you consider yourself a thought leader?
Well, I slightly cringe, Joe. I actually, at the risk of being a bit controversial, I slightly cringe at the word leadership. I got schooled on this recently by a friend who said that, if people are willing to follow you, then you're a leader. And so in my life, yes, I run a business with 50 people or so. A larger group of clients roll in behind that. These are people who are kind of following parts of my view on the world, right? So yes, I think you have to acknowledge some level of leadership, but I think when you link your identity to being a leader, it can actually close off a lot of opportunities, because yes, there are some points in your day where you're out the front making some decisions or setting a direction. There are huge chunks of the day when you're not doing that. And if somebody comes to you with a better idea, if your identity is linked to being out the front all the time, I think your ego can get in the way. I think you can miss great learning opportunities or great creative ideas or whatever. So the same for me applies to thought leadership. So yes, there are times where I know that I'm probably, from an expertise point of view, or an experience point of view, I might be further in front than the other people in the room. But I wouldn't like to define myself as a thought leader, because I think it can sort of shut down some learning opportunities along the way.
That's a really interesting take. Completely agree. I don't think I've ever heard it put that way, but I think it's certainly a smart way of looking at it. Being open to new ideas or having your ideas challenged and things like that. Is that something that you work on specifically? Is that your personality that you're open to doing that?
To be really honest, I think my natural tendency is more towards being open. We're never perfectly aligned, are we? We've got to push one way or the other. I push more into embracing those leadership opportunities. My natural tendency is to not consider myself in that light, but I will push for that, because sometimes that's what my role is, I've got to embrace that sometimes. I think it's tricky, linking your identity too much to it can be tricky, but also not acknowledging where you are leading can lead to a disservice of the people around you.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Is there someone out there whose thoughts you're following actively that you're kind of taking inspiration from?
I take a lot of inspiration from a lot of people, and I think there are certain people on the planet who we're lucky to have genius minds and gifted intellects that are worth following. For example, I recently saw Scott Galloway live at a conference, and we got to do a Q&A with him, and his quality of thinking, speed of thinking was absolutely sublime. And you just look at that brain and go, it's hard to relate to it. It's hard to learn because you just go, his leaps of logic are so great and so quick. And the breadth of what he draws on is so vast. At that point, you kind of go, we're just lucky to have him. But in my life and in my career in particular, I feel pretty fortunate that I'm surrounded by a lot of very inspiring brains and inspiring on a number of levels, like intellectually, commercially, from a value set perspective. Yeah, there's quite a few.
Hey, it's me again. If you've made it this far, I'm guessing you're enjoying the chat. Don't forget to give the Thought Follower a rating and share it with your friends. Otherwise, reach out to me on LinkedIn with any guest suggestions or feedback on the show. I'd love to hear from you. Let's get back to the episode. So, CEO of a creative agency, how would you describe your role? What's your number one KPI, or what do you do in the business?
Good question. I try to think about it on a couple of simple levels. So level number one is I do need to have a long view on where we're going. So I'll be thinking horizon 2 or 3. People will be bringing me challenges in horizon 1, and I'll be thinking, in my mind, we've solved that in horizon 2, but it hasn't been communicated yet. Part 2, the best CEOs are the ones who communicate the best. So have the view and then be able to communicate it well in an inspiring way, in a human way, and in a really clear way. The third one I'd say is to just be there for the people, be accessible and supportive. Nelson Mandela would call that leading from the back. So I think the distant view is leading from the front, and the people side is leading from the back. And I think that component's really important. I would say those are the 3 key components for any leader. But the fourth that I like to get involved with, perhaps to a detriment, but I really like the work. I like getting involved. And I think in the old days when we were much smaller, I could probably be involved in 80% of a project. Perhaps now I can be involved in 10% or 5%, but I still like to think that I can help push the thinking or the team to the difficult 5%, like the last 5%, the last 4%, the last 3% that other people don't get to. I'd like to think that I can still contribute on that level.
How did you arrive at that job description? Is this something you've gone and worked on with a coach or anyone that helps you, or is this just years of being in the role and learning by doing?
I spend time with a group of amazing CEOs and entrepreneurs, and I'm always amazed at how much a lot of people learn by reading and frameworks and applying those frameworks. For me, I find that what I crave isn't more information. There is a deluge of information. And what I crave is space and thinking space. And so to answer your question, I will use quiet time to distill information and organize it neatly based on the challenges that are happening in my life, the opportunities that I see, and I'll just work through those myself. So I'll use airplane travel, I'll use commuting in my car, I'll use, there's a beautiful park across the street here. I'll go for walks in that park and just use it to distill information. You'll talk to other people though who want more information and apply frameworks. I happen to be the opposite.
When did you find that out about yourself?
Joe, very good question. Very good question. Because I think it's really important that people learn how to use their own brains, and all our brains are different, but to create some sort of self-awareness about how your brain works, Joe, which is very different to how my brain works. This is one of the issues I have, by the way, with thought leadership, is it tends to make things quite generic. This is what the top CEOs do to win. They all get up at 5 in the morning and go to the gym and then read the paper. And mate, I do not work that way. And I don't know how you work, but it's probably not the same way that I work. But what I do think is important is to study yourself. Study your intellectual self, your emotional self, and learn how to optimize. Like, I know when my brain is getting tired, and when you're under pressure, every part of my body just wants to work harder. But I know if I take a short break, my productivity will go through the roof. I'm the king of micro breaks. I do a little long weekend or a little Airbnb or nothing expensive, but just something simple. And I come back red hot and ready to go. So I'm super like self-observant on how my brain works. And I've learned things that for me, space is important. I'll go for walks a lot. What I'll do, for example, if I'm working on a strategy project for a client, I will read a lot of information. I'll read their research. I'll read their annual report. I'll read their competitors. I'll walk their stores. I'll walk competitors' stores. I'll consume a lot of information. Then I'll put it down and I'll go for a walk. And I find that my subconscious flies so quickly and it organizes everything really quickly. Now, I've explained that technique to other CEOs and they think it's absolutely crazy. They're grateful that it works for me, but it doesn't work for everybody. But I think it's just really important that everybody makes the effort to learn how their intellect works and how their like emotional intelligence works as well.
Tell me more about that phase of your life when you were doing that learning, when you had these realizations. Like what was that like?
That phase of my life, oh God, if I'm really honest, I think I was just under a lot of pressure and needed to find answers. And I think I probably just had a few happy accidents. I could never sit down and go, right, it's 3:00, I'm going to solve this thing now. But I could bank all the problems, and then on my drive home, my mind would just go into this beautiful space of solving problems, and I was quite productive. Literally, for me, solving problems in the shower literally is a thing. I don't solve problems at my desk. In fact, again, coming back to our office design, for me, the desk is for administrative work. Banking, finance, emails, things like that, absolutely at a desk. Then I'll move over to the cafe space if I want to do more creative thinking. We've got a collaborative zone if I want to work with other people. And then if I want to solve difficult problems on my own, walking or driving works really well.
You mentioned you've got some hang-ups around thought leadership, not identifying, putting all your identity in being a leader or not being a leader. What about your personal brand? What does that mean to you?
Look, personal brand is important because it's your reputation. Brand effectively equals reputation. It's important. Again, I feel a little bit self-conscious with this kind of thing. And if anything, I probably err on the side of overcooking it. I feel like the people that need to know I exist tend to know that I exist and what the skill set is from a personal point of view. But I would say I undercook it and that it is valuable. You should do it. But, I think just authenticity is the most important piece in that. I mean, you can't influence or be a thought leader if you don't have some kind of network or following. Being authentic is key because I know that there are people out there that kind of hack the system or hack the algorithms or whatever, but I'd say play the long game. Be good, be kind, be clear on what your value is, and then don't be a jerk. And then those two things will work out, I reckon.
So Scott Galloway, who's Scott Galloway?
Oh, Scott Galloway, professor of marketing at NYU, entrepreneur, now business advisor, government advisor. I think he's number 72 top ranked podcast in the world, a legitimate sort of thought leader across a number of areas. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'll give him a follow. That's kind of my goal. Out of every episode, get one more thought leader to go and follow. So.
Prof G on your podcast apps.
Very nice. Matt, thanks so much for taking the time. I will come in and visit the G Store office and have a zero beer off the tap.
Yeah, you'd be very welcome.
The place to be.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers.
We'll chat again soon.
Cool.
Thanks so much for listening all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you'd like to support me or the show, best way is to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to podcasts. And please get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Love to hear from you with any guest recommendations or feedback on the show. See you on the next one.